by themselves, they're certified people.
No, of course, yeah. Okay. Moving on, just more so. Arvin, Staley, and
There's so many funny people in the rehab.
Oh, I know. Yeah. And I'm
Really
not
people.
feeling that
They're
way
just
as much.
that's nice.
So I'm like, okay.
Chess. I'm trying to be able to do it.
Oh, last one.
I'm decent at chess. So. Yeah.
You guys ready?
Yes.
Yeah. All right, so let me frame this up a little bit so we know what we're doing and what we're trying to do. We'll start with the big picture and then we'll kind of zoom in. I'm going to say what I believe to be the case and Todd can clarify if I've got totally the wrong picture in mind.
Your beliefs are wrong.
As a church, as a body of people, I think we would like to create an environment. It's kind of like what Ryan was saying, the accountability piece, that there is a relational accountability within the leadership team of the church. Is that a fair way to say it? Mm-hmm. And not from a top-down control kind of accountability, more of a relational accountability that we're helping each other learn and grow. Basically, I think that is that a fair way to say it?
Sure.
And as we grow, getting to what it says in Exodus about, appoint people to do tens and hundreds and thousands, like that stuff. With the view that we at East North have of what it means to be a deacon or be a leader in the church, that means that it actually includes a pretty good group of people. More than just 7 white-haired guys that are all over 50. Which, by the way, I happened to belong to a church at one time where the Acts chapter 6 was interpreted very literally, meaning there's supposed to be 7 deacons. That turned into a whole long conversation about like, I don't
Yeah, prescriptive.
I don't necessarily know that that's what it means. Okay, we can talk about that.
Perfect.
Yeah, so maybe went a little too far in being literal. But anyway, so as we grow, Todd can't be present 100% with everybody all the time. It's just not physically possible. And so part of what's evolving, so you probably all know that we're in conversation about me officially being part of the elder team and all that kind of stuff. The role that's evolving is probably like the helper to Todd in the leadership development world. Is that a fair way to say it? So you don't have to be responsible for all of it. Mm-hmm. And so helping, coming alongside Todd to assist in that, to help grow the East North culture, help grow mutual accountability, be part of the conversation about how we do things to create an organization that is healthy and survives, and hopefully outlives all of us. Kind of would be cool. Okay, so with that, Scott and I have been recording some podcast episodes that were built on the 7 Habits of Effective Ministry by Amy Stanley. The most recent one we just recorded is the last practice titled Work On It, which basically says work on your ministry, or as Michael Gerber, this is in the business world, not the church world, human organizations are basically human organizations. And Michael Gerber has a book called E-Myth, or an E-Myth Revisited, and all this kind of stuff. But basically it says work on your business, not in it. So when you're in a leadership role, you want to work on what you're doing, not in what you're doing. And the idea is that I'm working on the processes. I'm working on helping grow and develop the people. I'm trying to get myself out of the day-to-day running of the thing, so that hopefully I can get the thing to run in a perfect world without me. Okay, I don't think we're going to get there. It's utopia. Probably not going to happen. It's kind of like an aspirational. It would be awesome if this ran so smoothly. Nobody needed me at all. Is that framed up okay? Make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. Which leads to this idea. How do you work with it? Well, if you look at, somebody could look up Proverbs 27:17. And read it.
Iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another.
What the heck does that mean? What does that mean? Iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another.
Means friction is necessary.
Okay, that's a good point. Friction is necessary. Like woodworking is one of my things. So I have chisels and saws and that kind of stuff. And I have sharpening stones. You know, sharpening stones are abrasive.
It's kind of interesting that it's just iron and iron, not like a harder thing. versus,
Okay,
like,
exactly.
They're both the same.
Yep. There's a good insight there. Run with that, please.
Just I guess in the indication that like it's kind of this. There's mutualness that they each help each other out. It's
Yep.
not just like top down, like
It's
I
not
sharpen
top
you,
down.
but you have nothing to give me.
Exactly. So then the next part of that verse is one man sharpens another. So we'll build on that. Let's take this idea. Where does that lead us to? What's the conclusion we might draw from that? Like that's a practical reality in church life as we learn and grow and get better together.
I don't know if I wanna say the A word, but accountability.
Yeah. It really gets down to that idea of accountability. Is that we're accountable to each other. We talk to each other. We're comfortable occasionally having, I don't want to call it tough conversations. That doesn't have to be a tough conversation. It's like a loving conversation. And walk with each other to get better. Is that framed up okay? Okay. So with that, there's a word that's been used. You've probably heard it. Probably have some experience with it. So let's unpack the word. The word is coach. But what exactly does coach mean?
I think of someone who instructs other people.
Okay. So there is an instructing element to it. There is that all there is to it?
No, that was just the first word.
First what pops to mind, right? Instruct. Okay, so there's some instruction, or maybe some friction, to use Brian's word.
The coach also knows, like, this is where we're heading, like, the coach has direction, this is what we're working towards, and then maybe with the person develops a roadmap to get there, and the instruction comes along with that.
Kind of comes with the
Yeah.
package. Yeah, that's a good idea. Like the vision of where we're trying to get to, and maybe a outside the situation perspective to help guide in that direction. Other thoughts about what it means to be a coach or to coach?
I think the coach is for you, but not necessarily for what you're doing.
Oh,
You might be
that's
doing
good.
something wrong. No, like,
Okay.
that's not gonna work. But I want you to succeed. So
So
it's not like I'm
yeah.
against you personally, I just don't think what you're doing is working.
So a coach is able to distinguish between what the person's behaviors and like the heart for the person. They're two different things. I like that. That's a good perspective. You know, for you, not necessarily what you're doing. I've heard it said that a friend will love you where you are, a coach won't let you stay there. Because of that loving kind of, hey, let's get better. Oh, by the way, an important phrase here. Perspective I have is that if you think about the word better is a modifier of the word good. It is not a modifier of the word bad. So getting better does not imply bad. Better just means better than what we are. It's not, there's no negative at all in getting better. So, any other thoughts about coach or experiences with coach or coaching? Have you ever had a coach at any point in time? Athletic coach, academic coach, music coach, anything?
Sometimes it feels like you might be doing things the correct way, but a coach can distinguish very minute differences or tweaks that between, say like in yoga, you're doing the posture in a way that seems fine, and then they are able to notice that one small change that you need to make to and then they help you get there, and you're like, oh my gosh, this feels
This is awesome.
completely different than what I was doing before, even though I feel like I was just right there.
So I think that's a really good observation. Now let's think about why that plays out though. Why is a coach able to do that? So in this specific example, so you're doing yoga, can you see yourself?
You can't see yourself. They also probably have knowledge of your musculature and skeletal system that you might not have had training on.
Sure.
and stuff.
So there's a package of stuff, like even if you're looking in the mirror, you can't see all of you. The coach can see all of you and all the different pieces and how they interact and the whole, hopefully the whole system, and maybe has some training or experience in areas that you're just not aware of. And here's a thought, if you're not aware of something, does it make you stupid? No. So one of my favorite songs is a song by Billy Joel called The Entertainer. And in that song, I don't relate to every single thing in the song, but there's a lot of it, because a lot of my life is like The Entertainer. After a while, 1,000 miles, it all looks the same. Like, you know, Holiday Inn in Latrobe, Pennsylvania looks just like a Holiday Inn in Austin, Texas. There you go. What'd you see? Holiday Inn. Chili's or whatever. Okay. But there's a line in that song that says, things I did not know at first, I learned by doing twice. And I think there's a huge amount of wisdom in that. It's like, you know what? The reason I know that's a mistake, I did it. Let me tell you how that turns out. Yeah, I know it seems like a brilliant idea. That's what I thought. Not such a good idea. Just because the coach has experiences and can see things and is outside you. And I think this quote comes from Book Crucial Conversations. It says, you're on the wrong side of your eyeballs to be objective about you. Now that's true for all of us. We're all on the wrong side of our eyeballs to be objective about ourselves. It's just not physically possible. It's not emotionally possible. Like, you always have your emotions and your perceptions and your biases and your history. It's always wrapped up in your perspective. And you can't really get an objective view of what you're doing and make the decisions you're making and that kind of stuff. So sometimes when we need somebody to come along that, always for that. Okay, so given all that, what we're looking at is creating kind of a coaching relationship. And I don't know that I'll be coaching, let me say this. Coaching happens by permission, not by mandate. What does that mean? Coaching happens by permission, not by mandate.
You have like an earned authority.
It's completely earned. It's completely.
We have like a notion that authority is always bad in the
Yeah.
West because we're so individualistic. But if someone has more experience, is further down the road than you, you'd be a fool not to listen to them. So that experience earns their authority.
Hopefully that's true. Yeah. Let's hope. That's kind of it. But this is the idea, is that we want to create coaching relationships, not coaching conversations, by the way. I'm going to tell you that my perspective about a coach is a person who's in relationship with other people, not mandating to other people. Walking together with people to learn and grow. The idea that if I'm in a coaching relationship with them, I hope that I'm able to give some value to them. And you know what? I really hope that I get some value back. I hope that I get some perspective that's going to help me be better in my interactions with the enemy. I'm going to learn something. And we're all going to get better together, and collectively then Eastwood Church is better. Is that framed up okay? Makes sense? Okay. So let me give you some historical perspective on coach. I looked up the definition of coach, and by the way, the definition you give a coach is surprisingly not the first one that shows up. The first one, if you look it up online, is a large horse-drawn four-wheeled carriage, usually enclosed. Also true, right? So it has this kind of weird connotation, like a coach kind of, but if you think about it, go back and think, apparently that was, I mean, it's still the number one definition. The idea of coach as a person that helps in athletics or something like that really didn't show up until the 1800s. That's when it entered the language in the way that we use it today, English language. And if you think about it, it's still kind of the same thing. A coach carries you someplace you want to go. Does that make sense? So that's what we're hoping to accomplish, is to create some coaching relationship, and I'm going to make myself available to anybody who wants to spend some time with me. I'll say, yeah, just give me a text message and we'll talk. We'll kick around ideas. What's going on in your ministry? What's going on in your life? How can I help? Hey, I'm nearly 60. I've made a lot of mistakes since I was your age. I I would love to help save you some trouble. There are many things that I know that's a really, really bad idea. It will cost you dearly if you make that choice. Please, let me just encourage. Don't do it. Yeah, it seems like a good idea to do it by yourself. That's not such a good idea. You're right. So, with that being said, I'm offering to be a coach to anybody who wants my help. I also want to talk with you guys about what it means for you to be a coach for your team, because it extends throughout the whole church. Does that connect okay? So let's talk about some coaching philosophies, some coaching approach, maybe some coaching technique. Does that work okay?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to give you something that if you can go, this is in the book I wrote from Bud DeVos. I co-authored, I should say, didn't write it by myself. We're going to call this the ABCs of coaching. And the idea is if these three things aren't present, then you won't be a successful coach. This applies to parenting. This applies to leading your ministry team. This applies to work. This applies to interaction with your spouse, because all of this is relationship dynamics. But it's called ABCs of coaching. So the A is accountability. The B is belief. And the C is conversation. Okay, those are three things that have to be present for coaching work. It's like the prerequisites. So help me unpack this. When it says accountability, let me give you an amplifying word for it. When we say accountability, I'm going to say that it goes both ways. It's a mutual accountability, not a single direction accountability. So in that context, mutual accountability, what does that mean? Put this in the context, you're helping somebody in your small group. You're helping somebody on the hospitality team. You're helping somebody learn how to grow into their role. What does accountability both directions mean?
I've heard it defined, accountability, I've heard it defined as helping others achieve the goals that they want to achieve.
Yeah.
Basically, like the things that they want.
Yep.
You're helping them chase after those things and get them there.
Also kind of requires a commitment to being around each other so that
It does.
so that you can see when things are not good
Yeah.
between both people.
There's this mutual presence.
Yeah,
idea.
I was thinking you both have to show up.
Yep.
For there to be accountability.
And let's build on this idea. So what does show up mean? So I think there's a whole bunch wrapped up in that one
Yeah,
phrase.
for
What does that
sure.
mean?
Well, I think if it's just like physically being together, but then also having the emotional capacity
Okay.
to be able to connect with each other,
Mhm.
having the vulnerability of being willing to share and willing to listen, with showing up like emotionally.
You just said a ton of stuff. Right? The physical is probably like, oh, that's
Yeah.
okay. That's like obvious. There's some other stuff you said that I think is really critical there. It's like the emotional showing up, the vulnerability piece, willing to admit your faults and failures, willing to share your experiences openly and honestly, willing to not use what they share with you in a way that is harmful or critical of them in any way. So it's like, hey, we're just here trying to figure this thing out. It's the way Todd said it, helping people achieve the goals they want to achieve. But we can't do that if we're not vulnerable, if we're not honest and open and present and listening, and that's all bundled up in that word accountability. I think there's another thing that we've talked about a little bit, like in the podcast we talked about, but accountability I think also there is that if I'm working with people on my team of any kind, and I haven't been really clear about what we're trying to achieve, then I haven't fulfilled my accountability. Because they can't fulfill the vision if they don't know what the vision is. So I haven't given what I'm supposed to give, which means that I've kind of lost the opportunity to hold them accountable. Does that make sense? I like to think about accountability this way. I have a much higher desire to engage with people in a way so that they feel accountable than I position myself to hold them accountable. I'd rather have them feel accountable than be held accountable. What's the difference in those two statements?
Ownership.
Yeah, it's ownership. Yeah. I want them to do it because they want to do it. not because they feel like guys can be mad at them. That's not a very healthy relationship. So, accountability goes, how about this belief piece? What does belief mean?
Giving people the faith that you give yourself.
Okay.
Just assuming they're not a bad actor.
And if you look at what is happening culturally right now, if you pay very close attention to what happens in the press and political discussions, there is a very high prevalence of assuming that because a person had a bad outcome, they had a bad intention. And that belief piece goes to that idea, especially here in the church. Are we going to have bad outcomes occasionally? Are things going to go wrong? Are we going to say things that are misunderstood? Are we going to do something with the best of intentions that just doesn't land right? Yeah, because we're human. But I think it goes back to the mystery, the faith thing we talked about. That if my identity is in Christ, I don't have to get hung up on whether I made a mistake or whether you made a mistake, or we can just talk about it and fix it. I believe that you're a good person who wants to do a good thing. It just didn't turn out well. Does that make sense?
It's like the benefit of the doubt.
It really is, yeah. And there's this thing in psychology called the Pygmalion effect. It basically says that what we believe about people affects how they respond. And there's a whole bunch of studies. Rosenthal Jacobson experiments one, which is kind of creepy. So experimenting on elementary school kids. That's a whole different discussion about the ethical nature of that. So we have the data.
It's also true that what we believe about ourselves we project on other people.
Also,
So if you're like, I'm a bad actor, you're gonna assume everyone else is a bad actor.
that is
So
also,
like,
yeah.
you have to be secure enough in the gospel to be like, I can forgive myself for the mistakes I make.
Yep.
Therefore, I can forgive other people for mistakes that I make. And, you know, enter into good faith. I'm gonna shut up.
No, that was really good. No, please don't shut up. Keep going. That was good. Because I think you're right. I mean, we've talked about that in Demonstrate, Discover, Throw. Like, I've been forgiven, so why can't I forgive other people? I've been forgiven. Oh, by the way, so if you...
Yeah, Jesus put Peter in charge, who like betrayed him.
Right.
Explicitly called down curses.
Yeah.
And he put that guy in charge. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that belief thing. So let's think about what does that mean from a practical standpoint. You're working in your ministry area. What does belief mean? What does that mean you have to bring to the conversations with people on your team in order for this to be productive and helpful?
I think some form of like open-mindedness or this kind of naive optimism that like,
Yeah.
although maybe it's like I'm just looking at some things about you, I can come to some negative conclusion.
Absolutely.
But I think that there's something there that's like that's better than maybe the world would see or you would see for yourself. Like
Exactly. It's in some respects maybe a naive belief. I'm willing to set aside the very natural human tendency to assume the worst about situations. Because there is a part of human psychology called negativity bias that we tend to focus on the negative far in preference to the positive. And so if we're going to do a good job of coaching, we have to willingly set that aside. I have to be aware of this bias in myself. I go, you know what, I choose not to assume negative stuff about this person. Even though I'm really annoyed. But think about the interaction like with a child. Like, I could kill you. My preference would be to kill you because then I wouldn't have to deal with it anymore. Not if I go to prison, but that wouldn't be it. But I don't know about you, but I've had this experience as a parent. I could just take you out right now. You're really getting on my nerves. I didn't. They lived adulthood. We are not grandchildren. I didn't do it. I had the thought, just didn't do it. But that's all wrapped up in that belief thing. And I think we have to be really careful about how we engage with people. And because people know what your belief is about. Whether you say it or not, they know. They know.
I think too, like with belief, like you mentioned with that ownership, like you can lead a ministry and do
because you never had a chance.
So you're able to teach.
Yeah. That's a huge part of the belief in it. If I don't believe anybody on my team can take it over, I won't ever let them do it. Here is something I learned reading Colin Howell's autobiography. He's a pretty successful guy. I listened to what he had to say. He said that as soon as somebody on your team can do something somewhere in the 70 to 80% as well as you can, they're responsible. Which means you have to let them make mistakes. I'm not a very mistake comfortable person. I like for stuff to be perfect. And humans are messy. So that does affect my level of belief. I have to have this checkpoint. When am I willing to let go of it? What do I believe on people? If I don't let go of stuff, that basically says I don't believe in them. And if I don't let go of something, do they know I don't believe in them? Okay, think about this. Have you ever heard that?
I was gonna ask if this is the same kind of belief. Like, I'm not 100% clear on how the belief is being used. I know we've got great content coming out of it. But I wonder if it's like belief in what you're doing
That's
as
also
valuable.
all connected.
Like, you can't, like, I'm just thinking if you think your ministry responsibility is stupid,
Yes, I think you're
then
right.
how can you lead well? Because
Yeah.
like in your mind, you're like, it's just stupid, dumb, this, whatever it is. And I've actually had people, I mean, like, it was problematic, not at this church, this was while in Durham, that they said yes to the role and they were capable, they just thought the role wasn't even needed.
Yep.
It was like, well, thanks for crushing the ministry.
Right.
Because inevitably, their belief about the ministry, which was, it wasn't even necessary, led to the ministry to become a non-existent thing,
Yep.
where they kind of sort of came with like, see, I told you it wasn't any good. I was like, you've never liked it. Like, it's
a
good,
self-fulfilling
you're just-
prophecy.
Yeah, right.
So I think you're uncovering that there's inside belief, there's the why, what, and how. All three of them are wrapped in there. So I have to believe in the purpose of what I'm doing. I have to believe in why we're doing this. I have to believe in the value of it. I have to believe in what you're doing and who you are and how you're approaching this.
Right.
It's like they're all true. And they all coalesce in how I engage with people. Because if I don't believe in the purpose and I'm trying to coach you and get many, you'll pick up on it. You'll know that I think this is stupid. It'll be in my body language, it'll be in my eyes, it'll be there.
Right.
So I like to talk about this idea of, think about this for a second. Let's say that Ben and Kylie are our neighbors, on the other side is Leanne and Lydia. And you guys have a boat. And I'm talking.
We have a plane, right?
Well, I'm actually talking with you guys one day out in the front yard. You guys aren't home.
From, like,
No, you're gone. The boat is in the driveway. And you guys express a desire to have a boat. And I say, well, I have this great boat right over here. It happens to be in Leanne's driveway. Would you like to buy it? And then I sell you said boat. What is that called?
Deception.
That's deception, right? Grand larceny, fraud. There's a whole bunch of stuff wrong with this. Okay, so in the physical world, we acknowledge very readily, you can't sell what you don't own.
It's not tricky, right?
Well, so here's an important idea. If I'm trying to coach someone on a behavior or a result or an outcome, aren't I effectively trying to sell them on an idea? Guess what? You can't sell what you don't own. So if I don't buy the why, to Todd's point, I can't sell it to you. It's impossible. You'll figure me out. You'll know I'm a phony. And then our relationship's gonna get trashed. And the ministry's gonna die. It has a whole bunch of negative consequences. That all connected, okay? So you're right, all of that is in belief. I gotta check my belief. I gotta check what I believe in the people. I gotta check what I believe about the ministry and its purpose. I gotta check what I believe about the value of this relationship. Because if all that doesn't align, it's not gonna work. Okay, how about conversations? So we gotta have accountability both ways, we gotta have this whole bundle of belief thing, and then coaching can only happen in conversation. What does that mean? What's that?
Using words together.
Using words together. Yeah, exactly.
What about pictures?
And
You
that-
can, absolutely you can use pictures. You can.
You can.
You can, absolutely you can use pictures. You can draw diagrams to convey ideas, you can have that's all kind of wrapped up in conversation. What's the point of conversation?
Info share.
Info sharing. I think probably the emphasis is on the sharing part.
Converge and converse come from the same word.
Exactly.
So like they say, if you're gonna have a meaningful conversation, you like give the best possible version of what you think they're saying, and you interact with that instead of the dumbest possible version of what they're saying, and you sort
This
of,
kind of ties back to the point speech,
in
right?
turn, sort of engenders the desire to do the same. So
Yeah.
you're getting the best of what they're saying, and hopefully they're getting the best from what you're saying. You're writing something new, and like, yeah.
So the idea is converge, and they build something better
So you
than
make
what
something
either
new.
person had individually. The idea of iron sharpens iron, that shows up again in conversation. Okay, so how does this apply to you in your deacon role? Somebody tell me what you're getting out of the ideas that we put on the table here. How does this affect?
I'm feeling really convicted because, like, I kind of approach the prayer ministry like, well, it's kind of like a calling. You either want to do it or you don't. And, like, you know, convincing someone to show up early to come sit in a room, like a closet, and pray for it. It's like trying to force someone to be friends with someone else. It's, like, awkward and strange. And
Yeah.
that's probably wrong on my part because maybe I see, like, prayer as more of a personal thing and not as much of a community thing, and maybe that's where I'm like mistaken. So
Fair to consider.
I don't know. I was, but I'm honestly curious in your guys' feedback on that. Like, other than making an announcement and being like, you should pray, you know, like, what do you do? You know, because prayer to me is not talking to God; it's answering God. It's like a dialogue, and if someone's not interested in having a dialogue, in my opinion, you can't force them to do that. And I don't think you would even want to force someone to do that. So it's like conversational rape. So it's like you don't want to do that. So, but maybe I'm wrong, and like maybe I have some sort of defaulted idea about
I
it.
think elevating the need and putting that need in front of people can take the force part out of it, maybe.
And I think even stepping back and saying, okay, the point maybe of personal prayer is that, but the point of communal prayer is a little different of like confessing sins or bringing down issues of troubles, you know, like making that clear of like, here's our section where you can bring up your prayer, like you know, some churches have prayer boxes and things like that you put your prayers on, or like the cross and they have it where you hang up your prayers. We do the same kind of idea of like making a visual where there's like, hey, it's not just a word you have, we're a praying community, but like you can see it, like we are praying for every person that puts something here, brings up their
That's a really good idea.
fears, because to me I think of that communal prayer. This is all of us together. What are your burdens? What are your doubts? What are your fears? What are your joys? And what can we celebrate?
Yeah, I've done like a little Facebook thing, but Facebook just feels so fatuous and silly to me that I sometimes use it when I feel the need to do it, but most of the time I don't, because I'm like, it's social media, it means nothing. So sometimes it means something, sometimes it doesn't. But like, I think a prayer box, like we actually have to write it down, but or should be like, there will be people who will actually pray about this for you. That's a great idea.
For somebody that's new that comes in, they're like, I've got all these problems in my life, but I don't know anybody in here. And you have this thing that says, if you have difficulties, write your prayers, and know that this whole body's praying for you.
That's a great idea.
That could be something.
Which I will say, we have connect cards that are already in the back of the chairs, and it says like, question or prayer request. But I think a lot of people don't really know about
let's extract, there's two things here I wanna make sure we draw attention to. One, thank you for sharing that, because that's the only way we wrestle with issues, is put it on the table, right? And I think the way you approach that is an incredibly wise approach. The first thought was, maybe there's something I'm doing. It's the internal, like, okay, let me be really honest with myself. Am I doing something that's creating a scenario, rather than, oh, there's all these bad, nasty people out there? Which, by the way, reflects a belief about the people we're trying to reach. Oops.
Yeah, well, I
Something
kind of
about
got
myself.
I kind of got involved on it accidentally.
Yeah.
Because like I came here because I was having this weird thing going on. Like, oh, I'm not gonna get into it again. But like when I came to Eastport, Todd was talking exactly about that thing. I had been praying that thing for like a week straight, morning, noon, and night. I just happened to visit East North Church, and it was the exact thing he was talking about. And I'm like, oh, that's so weird. And then Todd's like, well, maybe you should do prayer ministry. Because I was like, yeah, okay. So I've been doing it, but admittedly, it's been rather haphazard. I mean, I've had some input from other people, but not really. Nothing that really ever like, super materialized. So,
Well, there's the second part you raised. One is the self-reflection piece, because whatever I'm seeing on my team is probably a reflection of me.
yeah, it's fair.
It's just whatever I see in my kids, probably a reflection of me.
43.
I think I mistakenly believe that other people will come into it the way that I did.
And
Like,
well,
God will just be like, you should do this. When maybe that's not accurate.
and in your defense, that's a completely natural way to see things. It isn't an accurate way to see things, it's a completely natural way to see things.
Yeah.
And we gotta start there, right? We gotta start with, okay, here's where we are, now how do we get better? So there's the second part of what he did there that is, both of these are universal. One, I got to consider, is there something I'm seeing on my team that I don't like? Probably that's a reflection of me. I need to look at myself first rather than look at my team. Step one. Step two is the idea of engaging in conversation with other people to help solve the problem. And you said, maybe I haven't invited people in enough, maybe I haven't made it open enough, maybe I haven't, I don't remember the exact words you used, but that's what I took out of the message. Is that maybe I haven't gotten enough input from people on what we could do better. I haven't engaged with them enough so I can hear their ideas, so that I can give them something, so I can give them the responsibility for something that they raise their hand for. Maybe that's true. That's not necessarily true. It's worth talking about, though.
Since I have everyone hostage, can I ask another question?
Sure.
I thought about like going through the verses that you're going to be going through, and then finding a counterpart to that in the Psalms, because the Bible teaches you how to pray. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
Psalms. So just find the counterpart to that and pray that psalm. But I know some people have an allergic reaction to like pamphlets and printed up stuff, and it makes it's like triggering. It's like, oh,
That's
it's
true.
like I'm back in
That's true. That's
Sunday
fair.
school again. Please don't. And I'm admittedly like that. I'm like, please take your pamphlets and shove them up your. But like, I would rather have some sort of something so people feel like it's not they're just walking into whatever, you know. I don't know. That's probably an area where I'm just assuming.
No, see, I think there's some wisdom here in acknowledging a couple things. One, people have negative triggers. They bring baggage with them into whatever ministry. They come from different histories, not in church, really legalistic church, really love everybody church, really structured church, really liturgical church. All these different histories, and we converge here each one. I think the idea of engaging with people to figure out what's going to work is the idea. And we're looking for a solution. We're not trying to prescribe a solution, we're looking for a solution.
Yeah.
And I think we're probably only going to get that in conversation with other people. I have a bad habit of getting in my head and trying to solve every problem all by myself. Anybody else ever done that? You know what I've learned? That I usually solve the problem faster if I'll talk to somebody about it. Now, interesting observation that I don't necessarily have to talk to somebody who's an expert in the field. In fact, a lot of my outside business coaching clients, this is one of this is like the sales pitch I'll use with them. I'll say, let's be clear here. I don't think I'm smarter than you. I think I'm not you. That's the value I bring to this relationship. I'm not you.
That's a good entry point for me to offer some perspective on why. Guy and I have actually been talking about doing coaching with you
For
months.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes this way, like, I fully believe that you're 100% capable and the right person in the role. And that you can solve all of your problems. But I know that what he's saying, like, you would totally benefit if there was more intentional time to work on it. Because unless you're just not working,
Yeah.
you don't really have a lot of time, or you don't, like, I bet, and I know you want to do better than this, but like, you don't think about doing the ministry until Sunday morning. You're like, oh, we gotta do this. Oh, gotta pull it together. It's life. Yeah, because it's life. So if there were some time slot where you knew for 30 minutes to an hour you would be talking about your ministry, that's going to benefit you tremendously. And it's not that Guy or me are going to, like, in fact, it should not be that the majority of our conversation is telling you what to do. Our conversation is to just do what we were almost doing with Ryan.
Yeah. That's
What I wanted to say, like, I don't know, Ryan, what do you think? Because, like, I think Ryan's capable of coming up with great ideas.
I'm tired of what I think. That's why I asked.
No, but like, I think what you lack is, like, you don't lack good ideas, you lack confidence. And as you put your idea on the table and you can hear someone else go, that's brilliant, that's great, do it. Your belief goes up.
Absolutely.
Because you're now like, oh, it wasn't a dumb idea. I wasn't shot down immediately. Like, there's some merit in it. And so you move forward just with that one experience with greater confidence and capability of leading, simply because you carved out some time to throw out an idea where you got confirmed, where it was like, yes, that's a good idea. Now, also, like, I think that the coach should also tell you, like, no, that's not a good idea. Like, why would you do that? But, you know, chances are, your idea, it's probably like, and also if that wouldn't happen, if you didn't have that 30 minutes to an hour of just soundboard thinking about your ministry, it'd be Sunday morning, you wake up, you'd be in a panic, and you won't have anything to bring to the table because you haven't had time to think about it. So it's almost like just sort of like a nudge of accountability, not because you're incapable, but because you are capable. To say, like, let's create an opportunity for you to have time during the week where you can think about your ministry. Because imagine, if you will, that your first coaching call amounts to this one question. What's the biggest problem you're trying to solve in your ministry right now? Wouldn't that be great if you could answer that question? And have a little time to work on it and walk away from that conversation going, I know what to do. And I've got the resources to do it, I just gotta go and do it. And I'm clear. Instead of sort of like playing catch up on Sunday morning and, oh, I never did the thing that we always have trouble with. I never did it.
And it bugs you for 6 months.
Yeah, and it just keeps being there. So that's really sort of like what Guy and I are trying to create, and we don't want it to be so burdensome that you're like, oh my gosh, not coaching again. Like, we need to find the frequency that works for you, the time that works for you, and that could be, I would say at the very least, I would hope that once a month we could have a conversation, and sort of like, not, the goal would be like, you bring the agenda, like, we're there to help you think and sort of address problems and come up with plans, but more or less we think you can do it. Like, what do you think? What do you plan? But it could be more frequent if you're like, I got time, I really want to work on these things, and I'd like to do this once a week. If that's what you want, then we'll try to figure out how to accommodate it. And so, okay, once a week we'll have a little check-in. Because I also think, like, it doesn't have to be a whole hour. Like, you could probably just be like, Especially if it's weekly, it's like,
It might be like 10 or 15 minutes.
yeah, like, what are you working on? This, how's it going? Here's where I'm stumped. What's your plan? I'm thinking this. Sounds good to me. Like, I mean, like,
This has made
Move,
me
go.
think of like just processing, cause a lot of times, literally just me telling Ben something, like,
Yeah.
I get to the conclusion because I have someone to, I guess, dump it on, or unload it
Yeah.
on. But it's,
Without
yeah,
saying anything wrong with it.
Yeah.
yeah.
most of the time, yes, like, he's got big ears and I have a big mouth. But it's also making it, like, with prayer, specifically what we're talking about now, there's a good, sermon series by Tim Mackey on his podcast, Exploring My Strange Bible, about prayer. And one of the first ones is literally like this idea, I can't remember what song he goes through, but it's literally just, most of this is actually you just processing, not like, I think we get the assumption that God knows what I'm feeling, so I just need to tell him what I need, rather than like he's ready and wanting to hear how I'm feeling, and he knows what I need. And so like my requests are actually smaller, and there's less requesting, like deliver me, save me, I need it, like those kind of things. It's literally David just like dumping, like, I feel like this awful thing right here. I feel like this too. This is, and a lot of times that is also what we're kind of like, I just need to hear, like, that this is not stupid, and I need, like, validation from my God who sympathizes with all of my weaknesses, and I don't know, I'm just like, processing seems to be like even more helpful than almost even the like direct like prayer.
I think you're right.
You know what I mean? It's like, let's just be a space for open ears for a while.
So I'll validate what you said there.
That's a great idea, because like a lot of the Psalms end in utter despair. There's like 3
Yeah,
or 4
yeah.
of them. And some people be like, because normally they end on a note like, but God is good, and I'll praise him in the temple, and everything will be fine. But some
Yeah.
of them end like, I just want to die. And God,
Yeah.
you seem like a total enemy, and that's the end.
Yeah.
And so God's like cool with people being totally honest, even if what they're saying is kind of BS. Like, even though it's not BS, because that's how they actually feel, so that doesn't mean it's BS.
Yeah. And
It's not theologically correct.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, God's cool with that. He's like, yeah, I'll allow this in my Bible even. Because I want you to be honest.
I
So,
mean, there's this like weird self-correction that God actually is. I feel like a lot of times we're trying to like get on. This is what my therapist and I were talking about this week. Like, I need to get to the holy part of my like reaction to this thing that happened, and it's actually in like really allowing the human experience and like the like working through your emotions and not letting them just happen to you, that you are actually experiencing the holiness of those things. I don't know how this is necessarily relating to what
It's
we're talking
completely
about.
related.
But like just having like learning how to have conversations with the Lord that are truly conversations, not just purely instructive and purely higher to lower, but
Or solution oriented.
solution oriented. Does that make sense?
it's kind of a safe space
Yeah.
to talk to God. And, like, Scripture is kind of like, yeah, be careful how you do that, because some people are not safe to do that with, but God is.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I think it would be good to have like maybe like people who would be down for that,
Mm-hmm.
but they'd have to sign up for it. They probably have to establish some sort of rapport too. But I think that's a great idea. I really like that
Tim
idea.
Mackey, like, really.
Yeah, I
That's
love that
that.
My Strange Bible podcast. I kind of
That's
hate
so
that they
good.
like DC'd it, because they kind of stopped for a while because it was. But
Sad.
yeah, Tim Keller does a lot of good series on praying your feelings and stuff too.
I'll offer this to validate what he said. There's about a third of people, this is not perfect, but about a third of people would prefer to process internally and then just have their thoughts validated after they've come to a conclusion. That's about a third. About 2/3 of people don't know what they think until they say it. This is not abnormal, this is just human beings. And so the opportunity to say it so that we can hear it and then figure out if that's what we mean.
Yeah.
This happens to be my wife, by the way.
Yeah, for sure.
I am the third who likes to sit by myself and process and go, here's my conclusion. My wife likes to tell stories and decide at the end of it whether that's what she thinks or not.
That's not like my wife at all. She says,
Just talk.
yeah.
And so a lot of the time, I spend a lot of time listening to Sandra. I know there's a point here somewhere. She'll get there.
Yeah.
She did. In fact, she hasn't decided what the point is yet. She's trying to figure it out. She's on a path to find the point.
Yeah.
The only difference is, I do the same thing. I just do it as I hear.
Yeah.
I don't say it out loud.
I mean, how many times
So-
have Leander said, did you just answer your own question? And I'm like, yeah, okay, I don't need you to say anything.
So I remember when and this is sort of like an aspiration if we're gonna be involved in coaching you guys. I was coaching missional community leaders, and I knew I had done my job when at the end of the conversation the guy would go, man, thank you so much for all that you've done to help me here. Like and I said, I didn't do anything. All I did was ask you what needs to be done. And then you're the one that had great plans with great intentions and great strategies. All I did was say yes. Coaching is not, if all of your experience with coaching is like sports related, then you kind of have a skewed experience where it's like, well, he's going to tell me. But that's not the job necessarily. Like, if we hear something that's a big red flag, common sense will kick in and we'll be like, whoa, you shouldn't do that. Like, we'll say those things, but more than likely, you know what needs to happen. You're probably like the 2/3 of the population that just hasn't said it yet. And when you say it, you'll go like, oh my gosh, I need to do that now. And then we'll be there to be like, cool, I'll talk to you next week because you know what to do. Like, you got it. That's a great idea. And so I think, I know that like when I was part of a church that had active coaching relationships set up for the leaders always made progress. Problems got solved faster, things got healthier, it just worked. And then when we didn't have it, it was sort of like, like in and out, up and down, just ebbed and flowed based on what the people were. But like, just the simple idea of like, I'm going to do a check-in, maybe a 30-minute phone call. I'm going to bring what I'm working on, or what I'm challenged by, what problem needs to be solved. And sometimes it's just so silly, and you know it's silly because it's something like this. I just need to order batteries. Oh my gosh, like that can happen in production. And then
Absolutely.
you go like 3 weeks and you're like, why am I not ordering these stupid AA batteries? And then finally you pull the trigger and it's like, okay, now that problem's solved. So like, we're hoping to make room for that. And I'm going to be following up with you guys by email to just say like, do you want to talk with God? Do you want to talk with me? Do you want to just start with once a month? Do you feel you want it more frequently? Do you prefer a phone call? Do you do video chat? Like, face-to-face is also great. Like, I would say, like, especially for a missional community leader, if there is some drama happening that you don't know how to handle, face-to-face might be very good, because it's like, it's just spiraling in a weird way, and I need help. Like, if it's a hard thing, face-to-face. But if it's, like Ryan, your world of trying to figure out how do I raise awareness so people get involved in prayer ministry, it's probably okay to do that over the phone, like just talk it through and think about it. Yeah, I feel like there was one more. Oh, there is one more thing, but it's not quite related to coaching.
Okay.
Would you mind closing us out in prayer?
Absolutely.
Give me a chance to just throw out one idea.
Okay.
It's pretty easy, pretty quick.
Lord, I thank you for our time together today. Praise you that we can have open and honest conversation with each other, that we can share ideas, learn from each other. I pray for your presence, Lord, that you can help guide each of us in the type of relationship you want us pray you go with us this day and help us know you better